In France, a mighty fortress with an extraordinary past.
The story that somebody could take it so easily, it's almost unbelievable.
An Argentinian hotel for Nazi sympathizers.
When the Ihorns create their special little bit of Nazi Germany, that is the shape of things to come.
In Hawaii, Elvis Presley's home away from Hollywood.
You have Elvis Presley staying not just to make movies, but then going back with Priscilla Presley and their new baby, Lisa Marie.
And the opulent mansion of a Mexican crime boss.
He also trafficked in weapons, and it's alleged that he practiced torture and extrajudicial executions.
Decaying relics. Shadows of lost worlds. Ruins haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. In the highlands of Argentina, there lies an estate built for the rich and powerful.
You've got these beautiful mountains, and you have nestled in there this beautiful, large, old building.
You go into this place, and it's absolutely sumptuous. And it's clearly targeted at a rather upmarket clientele.
But details that tell the story of this place are now missing.
If you look up at this arch, you can see that there used to be something that has clearly been knocked off. It looks like there was a hasty change to this arch. Wonder what was there.
Everything here is at the heart of a controversial theory. Did an infamous tyrant fake his own death and escape here to seek sanctuary?
Of course, this is complete rubbish and not true at all. But the fact that that conspiracy theory exists, that people think about this, gives us a clue to the history of this building.
In 1897, this land was just an empty meadow until the arrival of one man.
A German tourist comes into Argentina and comes to this region and realizes this is beautiful. The air is clean, it's just a wonderful space. And he makes this decision to build a hotel.
His hotel was to be the most luxurious in all of Argentina.
It had 100 bedrooms, it had 38 bathrooms. Now that doesn't seem a lot by today's standards, you know, but at the time, 38 bathrooms for 100 bedrooms, that was a lot. And it was electrified, meaning you had electric light in every room and in all the common areas. And it had, you know, huge kitchens, refrigerators, so that the guests could partake of all the fruits of Argentina, you know, some of the best beef in the world.
But not all of the rooms were built for luxury.
Not far away from the gloss and glitz of the hotel is the gritty side of the place. Here is an engine room, a generator room. It's where the grease monkeys who keep the lights on are all doing the hard work.
But the no-expense-spared approach wasn't overly successful.
The original owners could never get this hotel profitable enough to make up for their debt, but they did find someone to buy it from them.
In 1912, the hotel came under new management. It was bought by a married couple called Walter and Ida Ihorn.
The Ihorns were very clever in their business techniques. They had a lot of great ideas. They worked in the sophisticated circles of the day, the more popular and wealthier crowds, and were able to convince them that Argentina was the place to go and the Hotel Eden was the only place to stay.
Gabriela Sanchez has studied the couple's fascinating story.
A medida de que fue pasando el tiempo, fueron, digamos, modernizándolo un poquito más. Por esa razón hacen lo que es el teatrino, shows, pistas de patinaje, canchas de tenis, de croquet, de todo tipo de actividades, cabalgatas también. Entonces la idea era de que el pasajero cuando viniera se sintiera realmente cómodo.
Germans start to come and stay at the Hotel Eden because it's one up on their neighbors who only went to Baden-Baden.
The Ihorns had turned the hotel around from a failing business to a thriving resort. But it soon began to attract a very specific kind of clientele.
Bueno, aquí nos encontramos en lo que fueron una de las habitaciones más caras que llegó a tener el hotel. Esta era la suite presidencial. Estaba dividida en diferentes sectores. Acá nos encontramos en lo que fue el sector de los vestidores. Contaba con baño privado.
All sorts of prominent Germans, went there, including Albert Einstein, who was there in 1925.
But a rumor suggests that another influential German stayed at the hotel. A rising star in German politics, Adolf Hitler.
One of the really difficult aspects of the early days of the Nazi Party was that Hitler was the most engaging speaker the Nazis had. And he went on speaking tours around Germany to raise money and gain support for the Nazi Party. The Ihorns were just the kind of forward-looking modern people with money who Adolf Hitler was trying to latch onto.
Walter and Ida Ihorn invested their own money into Hitler's National Socialist Party. Hotel Eden became an Argentinian outpost for Nazi sympathizers.
Sí, en este sector tenían una radio, un sistema de antenas que solían tener donde escuchaban los discursos del Führer. Se juntaban por las tardes a escucharlo.
They would sit in the bar at the Eden Hotel and they would drink German wine and eat German food and talk German talk. They were German heroes, drinking German beer and listening to the greatest German of them all, Hitler.
The hotel's entrance was even decorated with Nazi symbols.
If you look at old photographs, you can see what was missing. And what it was on that great arch above it was a giant eagle in the German style, following the pattern of the National Socialist Party.
The couple's loyalty was rewarded on their silver wedding anniversary in 1937.
The Ihorns hold a huge party at the hotel. They invite all the best guests and all sorts of important people from the region and from Germany to come to the hotel to celebrate their 25th anniversary.
Bueno, acá nos encontramos en lo que fue el salón comedor principal del hotel. Tenían muchos adornos con flores. Les gustaba mucho el tema de las flores naturales. Adornaban también con luces, esas tipos navideñas que colocaban de columna en columna. El cielo raso blanco que tenían en aquel entonces también era adornado. Quedaba realmente muy, muy lindo.
The Ihorns invited the German ambassador to Argentina as a guest of honor. He arrived bearing a special gift.
And, they get into some sort of dream state because they've heard that the German ambassador is coming from Buenos Aires with a present from the Führer.
The gift was a photograph in a silver frame. It came with a personal message.
Mr. and Mrs. Ihorn, to my comrades in battle during difficult times, for your silver anniversary. Warm wishes, Adolf Hitler.
For them to receive this gift is going to mean a great deal to them. And it's going to elevate them politically, that Adolf Hitler is going to think so highly of them to send such a personal gift.
Throughout the Second World War, the Ihorns boasted of their close friendship with Hitler, although it might not have been quite as close as they thought.
What really happens is this. No doubt somebody from the German Foreign Office goes over to Hitler's office and says, can we have another one of those autographed pictures? And Hitler's secretary gets the Fuhrer to write a little handwritten note. They stick it onto one of 1,000,000 Hitler pictures, and they send it in the diplomatic pouch out to Argentina. That day, that 25th anniversary day in Argentina, was so special because Hitler himself had noticed them. Great.
But of course, their beloved Hitler didn't quite deliver the Nazi utopia he had promised.
Well, Argentina was always heavily German influenced. They were a natural ally for the Germans in World War II. So of course, they do not join the Allies when the war breaks out. So they grudgingly declare war on Germany only in 1945, and very half-heartedly.
Overnight, Hotel Eden became an enemy of the state. The Argentine government seized it as a Nazi stronghold. The luxury apartments were used as prisons for Japanese diplomats.
Then after the war, they give it back to the Ihorns. But, you know, all the life has kind of gone out of the Ihorns. They were big Nazis, big Nazi sympathizers. Their dream has gone away. They've gotten old. They don't want to put any more energy into it.
The Ihorns retired and faded from public life. But Argentina remained a safe haven for Nazis.
In those post-war years, the Argentinian president was very sympathetic to the cause of these former German Nazis. And so you end up having thousands of these former Nazis being smuggled out of Germany, coming to Argentina, often bringing their wealth with them, and living in Argentina for absolutely decades.
Even today, the hotel is the subject of weird speculation and madcap theories.
Because this place used to be owned by Germans and because they were kind of Nazi, people say that Hitler snuck out of Germany and came and stayed in this hotel. This is nonsense. Hitler died in his bunker by his own hand, and he did not end up in Argentina. The end.
In Guerrero State, a traditional coastal town on the western shores of Mexico, there's a great architectural relic.
This is a place where you have hotels and residences with a beautiful sea view.
The bay curls round, forming this kind of sheltered utopia.
Above the sands of Tanejo sits an abandoned complex with echoes of ancient Greece.
Beyond the gates, there's this unkept path with eerie, headless statues and fallen columns around it. And you get the sense that there's something very sinister in the air here.
The basement is dank and very frightening. There also appears to be the beginnings of a tunnel. What possible need would you have for a tunnel down here? And where does it lead?
But above the dilapidated basement is a place of wonders.
You've got 42 Doric columns and this Parthenon-shaped structure, but the place hasn't been wrecked and vandalized. It's still pretty intact. There's sort of a nimbus of power that still surrounds the place.
To the side of the entrance, these snake-like vines creep through these colossal cages. What could they possibly have been used for?
Rodrigo Campos first came here in the 1980s when he worked for the local government.
Te estoy llevando a un lugar que hace 40 años surgió aquí en Tanejo. Un lugar que nadie esperaba encontrar con esta magnitud, con este esplendor que tuvo en sus tiempos y que ahora está en el completo abandono.
Since it was closed, few people have been allowed inside.
Inicio de esta construcción, a todos los lugareños y los que visitaban nos llamaba la atención. ¿Por qué? Porque además estaba envuelto en un velo de misterio. ¿Por qué? Porque nadie podía entrar, para empezar. Entonces esto siempre mueve a ¿qué ocultan? ¿Por qué no lo dejan pasar?
This is the holiday home of Arturo Durazo Moreno, a Mexican police chief with expensive tastes.
Cuando esta construcción se terminó, realmente era un esplendor grande, columnas, techos altos, columnas enormes. Las recámaras eran unas camas de lujo. Los baños unos muebles, lavabos, tazas de primerísima calidad.
This became a real go-to spot for high-flying, decadent set of Mexico that could afford to fly in on their helicopters or dock their private yachts in the bay below. He would throw these robe parties in which famous actors and even the president's own mistress would come to the party wearing just their robes.
But Durazo's eccentricities didn't end there. This was his far-flung shrine to the human form.
Encontramos nosotros en los frescos todo el tema es griego, ¿sí? Todo es dedicado al hombre y mujeres, al desnudo, evidentemente eróticos.
The upstairs bedrooms were the venue for numerous orgies. With their mirrored ceilings, I'll leave it to you to imagine the indulgences that the guests enjoyed in these rooms.
It gets darker than that. If you look closer, you see satanic images, images of violence, and they kind of radiate a sinister feel.
The graphic imagery depicts fictional violence, but the building's story began in the aftermath of a real war. In 1968, a conflict between the government and guerrilla groups reached a violent peak with a state-funded massacre.
This paramilitary force opened fire on a large group of peaceful student protesters in Mexico City, killing hundreds and forcing thousands to flee in terror for their lives. During this period, people on the state payroll practiced disappearances, kidnappings, torture, illegal imprisonment, and even extrajudicial execution.
One of the architects of this war lived on top of the hill in his Greek palace.
This is the Parthenon of the Mexican thug and infamous chief of police, Arturo Durazo Moreno, otherwise known as El Negro, or the Black.
El Negro was the childhood friend of López Portillo, the long-serving president of Mexico. When he was a kid, he got bullied in school, and El Negro was his protector. So, of course, when López Portillo becomes president of Mexico, he makes El Negro the chief of the Mexico City Police.
El Negro was able to capitalize on the chaos to enjoy the perks of his new job. The Parthenon became his lair.
This guy was earning $1,000 a month as chief of the Mexico City Police. This place was built at a cost of $35 million. You do the math.
So where did the money come from? Extortion, corruption, intimidation, embezzlement, that's where.
His powerful friends kept him safe, and he's reported to have pocketed around $1 billion whilst he was in charge. Now, this is a guy who is said to have lit his cigarettes using $100 bills.
Durazo turned the Mexico City police force into a mafia. They even helped build his mansion.
He needed about 1,000 laborers to build this, so he just told 1,000 Mexico City cops, hey, you're gonna build my dream home. And they worked at government expense to build this place.
Durazo's coastal retreat became the hub of his criminal activities.
Cocaine was the glamour drug of the 1970s, and El Negro stepped in to supply this sought-after powder, and it made him very rich very quickly.
When you look around this place, you start to see evidence that this guy really was, a big narco in Mexico. There's this little compartment under the pool that can be explained as being for pool maintenance, but it's obviously a place where he could hide out. There's a tunnel that leads under the palace and out to the sea. This was for trafficking cocaine onto boats.
El Negro's syndicate came down hard on criminal competitors. His methods certainly produced results.
During his time as the head honcho of the police in Mexico, the crime rate dropped substantially.
On his watch, criminals had a serious incentive not to cross the line.
Vamos ahora a mostrarte algo que te vas a sorprender cuando veas lo que había. En este lugar que bien pareciera una casa para dar albergue a una pequeña familia, pues también daba albergue, pero ¿a quién creen? A unos leones. Estaban aquí unos leones que tenían, bueno, podemos decirlo así, entre comillas, ciertas comodidades. Bueno, se habla de que en esta jaula como que se amenazaba con meter a alguien ahí. Se te vamos a mandar a los leones.
In January of 1982, several tortured bodies of Colombian bank robbers turned up on the banks of the Tula River, and it became painfully obvious that it was really torture and intimidation and violence that was keeping the criminal element in check. People began to ask more serious questions about Durazo and his methods.
Later that year, El Negro's friend, President Portillo, was replaced by Miguel de la Madrid.
In 1982, President Miguel de la Madrid was elected, and El Negro lost his position as chief of police. The new president began what he called moral renovation and a war on corruption. For El Negro, the game was up.
To avoid arrest, Durazo fled the country.
He just abandons places like the Parthenon, leaves like dozens of expensive automobiles, and he goes off to the United States hoping that, he won't be charged there. In the meantime, the Mexicans are putting together a list of his crimes.
El Negro was charged with tax evasion, extortion, smuggling, and possession of illegal weapons. After 2 years on the run, he was finally captured, put on trial, and sentenced to 25 years in a Mexican prison. And the Parthenon was abandoned.
Hace unos años regresé y dije, ay caray, ¿qué pasó por aquí? ¿Qué una tormenta o qué fue? Porque casi todas las esculturas, muchas tiradas, sin cabeza, rotas, sin pasto, la piscina, un muladar, pues claro, no hay mantenimiento. Y se vandalizó.
El Negro served only 8 years in prison before he was released. He died in 2000, but his brutal reputation is still not forgotten by many Mexicans.
And we have to ask ourselves, the question that the Romans often ask themselves about giving people power. You can choose watchmen to watch over us, but who watches the watchman?
Today, El Negro's Parthenon is a towering memorial to a time of dirty war and corruption. Its walls may be uncomfortable reminders of the past, but the local government here hopes it will one day be repurposed to properly serve the local community. In the French countryside, an unusual concrete structure rises from the ground.
The landscape is broken by this strange five-sided shape. There are these bizarre metal protuberances coming up. Some of them look like helmets.
As you come close to this construction, you can see massive poured concrete fortifications. You can't build this in the Middle Ages. You can't build this in the Renaissance. This building, this construction, is all an artifact of the Industrial Revolution and of the 19th and 20th centuries.
The walls hold clues to its fascinating past.
You can see the remains of battle all around. Clearly, a huge fight took place here, but the question is, who won?
It's situated just 20 miles from the border with another European superpower.
This spot is clearly going to be key terrain in any conflict between Germany and France.
This fortress was once known as the most powerful in the world. But in February 1916, it was captured by a commando team like no other during one of the most infamous battles of World War I, the Battle of Verdun.
The fighting around Verdun was one of the most drawn-out episodes of the First World War.
The battle lasted for 11 months. The German plan was to tie down thousands of French troops fighting at historic Verdun. The most vital fortification here was Fort Douaumont.
There's strong and there's impregnable. And Fort Douaumont was impregnable. It could house over 1,000 soldiers, and its walls were 8 feet thick and made of steel-reinforced concrete.
Douaumont had been considered the most invincible defensive position in the world. But on February the 25th, 1916, the fort was captured. Patricia Piatek has come to the place where the German attack began.
Le fort est encerclé d'un fossé de 8 mètres de profondeur et 10 mètres de largeur. Donc cet armement permettait de défendre le fort si des assaillants passaient sur le glacis.
A French soldier was manning his post, and he saw Germans come rushing across no man's land.
The French soldier tried to hold them off, but it was hopeless. The German attackers made it to the walls. Just 10 minutes later, Fort Douaumont had been taken.
A fortification this massive, this impressive, you would think that this would be a long, involved campaign, all sorts of bloodshed. And so the story that somebody could take it so easily, it's almost unbelievable.
If you ask a staff college audience the question, what do you need in order to attack a well-entrenched enemy like a fortress? The textbook answer is you need 6 to 1.
But incredibly, Fort Douaumont had been captured by a single German soldier.
The soldier had not only dodged a sniper's bullet, he'd also single-handedly overrun a machine gun nest and locked its entire crew in a classroom. This inevitably poses the question, how on earth did one person do this? Well, there are several versions of the story.
Supposons que l'ennemi est face à nous, eh ben le capitaine de l'observatoire va alerter, mettons pour la tourelle mitrailleuse, son occupant qui permettra lui de tirer sur l'ennemi.
But as the Germans approached the fort, the lookout made a crucial mistake.
A French infantryman thought he saw something, shot at it, realized that he didn't want to shoot other Frenchmen, and put his rifle down.
It gave the Germans the opportunity they needed.
Nous nous trouvons juste ici devant le coffre nord-est. C'est par ici que l'armée allemande est rentrée dans le fort.
3 soldiers scoured the fort for French infantry. One was Sergeant Felix Kuntz, who made a startling discovery inside a briefing room.
Quand le soldat allemand arrive dans cette pièce, il découvre un grand nombre de soldats français.
Il les pointe avec son arme et un gros obus tombe sur cette casemate.
The explosion sent a shockwave that extinguished all the lights.
So as soon as the lights go out, he dives out of the room, slams the door, bolts the door, and the Frenchmen are all locked in when the lights come on.
With a large portion of the French garrison locked in the briefing room, the Germans were able to completely capture Fort Douaumont.
It really does seem like an extraordinary military achievement, taking this vast fort without a single shot being fired. But in fact, there's a wider context.
The previous year, France had actually redeployed many of its troops elsewhere. Fort Douaumont was, in fact, an acceptable loss.
When the Germans win Fort Douaumont, it is not a great German victory. It is simply a repositioning of forces which the Germans mistake for success.
But the truth remains that Sergeant Kuntz and his small force had managed to capture one of the most powerful fortresses in the world. To make the most of a great propaganda opportunity, a grand German victory parade was essential.
The achievement of the German army in winning this fortress is something that the Germans really want to use in propaganda to energize the rest of the German army to beat the French.
At first, Sergeant Kuntz seemed to modestly play down his role in the fort's capture. There was one part of the epic tale that he feared might spoil his reputation.
C'est ici, dans cette pièce, que le soldat allemand a découvert le garde-manger de l'armée française.
Once the French soldiers were locked into that classroom, Kuntz then came upon a kitchen or mess hall, and he was famished. He was absolutely famished. And so when he came upon this food, he takes this moment to eat it.
And Kuntz is really worried that he is going to get in trouble for having paused to eat all the good French food down in the French canteen. So for years after the First World War, Sergeant Kuntz doesn't tell anybody that he was the guy who got into the fortress first.
Germany held Fort Douaumont for another 8 months. It's one reason why Verdun became the longest land battle in history. 300,000 soldiers were killed at Verdun, all as a result of a German strategy that ultimately cost them the war.
The Germans were there to make the French fight and die. The Germans don't need to take Verdun. They just have to fight Verdun. But they lose the plot. They try to win the battle at Verdun. And it's one of the reasons they lost the war.
On the east coast of Kauai, Hawaii's oldest island, an abandoned structure has been reclaimed by nature.
This is a gorgeous place. There's trees, there's lagoons, but then there's all these buildings that are abandoned. They're falling into disrepair. And the question is, what is this place?
Lush palm trees have taken over the site, making it a green oasis. Tucked away amongst the greenery are what look to be bungalows.
As you enter the structures, one of the first things you notice is the murals that are very colourful, lining all the walls.
The elaborate architecture of this complex makes you feel that at its height, this was probably a beautiful place, but now all that remains is eerie silence.
Fans of the big screen may feel like they know this place from somewhere.
All of Hollywood would stay here. You know, Sinatra, John Wayne, Elvis.
As you walk around, you can see that it was once quite lavish, even though today it is in great disrepair.
But even now, this rundown place attracts rock and roll fans from all over the world, looking to follow in the footsteps of the king.
And all his fans, and there are a zillion of them. They all come here.
It has become a mecca for Elvis fans. But something happened to turn it into a ruin. The buildings here stand just inches above the waterline, but this swamp is a holy spot.
This area lies at the mouth of the Wailua River, and this river holds a special significance to the people of Kauai. To this day, the native people of Kauai believe that this spot is sacred.
This land was once part of the Hawaiian kingdom, until it was bought by a private investor in 1890.
I've been coming here every day for almost 30 years now.
In the 1990s, Bob Jasper became a frequent visitor.
We are at the most famous abandoned building in the whole South Pacific. Welcome to the Coco Palms Resort.
The Coco Palms was a hotel, the dream of a businessman called Lyle Lol Guslander.
Guslander, or Gus, as he was known around the times, was very smart, very active. He was known as a little rough around the edges, maybe a little bit of a tough guy, but he was very ambitious.
Despite Gus's great ambitions, he couldn't run the hotel on his own.
It had 24 rooms, it had 5 employees, and 2 guests. So it was a far cry from this luxury resort that Gus had envisioned.
If the Coco Palms was going to be a success, Gus needed help.
He knew a very intelligent woman named Grace Busher. He asked Grace if she would come and operate his hotel.
Together, the pair set about to transform this little lodge into what they expected guests' Hawaiian fantasies to look like.
In 1953, Grace Busher was hired to transform the fortunes of the Coco Palms Resort.
At the time, Grace was 43, had no prior hotel running experience. She was a non-Hawaiian, originally from Pennsylvania with no background in Hawaiian culture.
What Grace lacked in experience, she made up for in enthusiasm. She moved into the cheapest room at the Coco Palms, where she faced her first big challenge.
All along the front of the hotel here, right out here where you see this big ditch, were the tracks. And the train would go by here, who knows how many times a day, blowing its horn.
Customers began to complain, and bookings were affected. But the train was carrying sugarcane, which was then part of a billion-dollar industry.
Well, this is just irritating Grace to death. So one day, at 3 in the morning, Grace took a chair out, set it on the track, sat down in the chair, and said, "That's it. Until your boss tells me you're not gonna blow the horn anymore at 3 in the morning, I ain't moving." And that was Grace, and she got her way.
Grace faced down the sugar company and won. It was the first in a line of victories and creative innovations. When some rooms became infested with frogs, she rebranded them the Frog Rooms. She even devised the famous Tiki Torch ceremony, which is now a staple of the Hawaiian vacation. But it was another billion-dollar industry that left an indelible mark on the hotel.
This is a very special place.
Written in the cement here are the words "Pagan Love Song," filmed at the Coco Palms.
That starred Esther Williams, Howard Keel, Rita Moreno. And as far as Hawaii and the traditions, that did a pretty good job of showing it. and they left something behind for us, which we found etched in the cement.
Pagan Love Song was the start of a long relationship between Coco Palms and Hollywood.
Elvis shot one movie here, and that was Blue Hawaii. But that was his most successful movie. It was huge. It not only helped put Coco Palms on the map, it helped put Hawaii on the map. It's a huge deal for the hotel. We're going into bungalow 56. Every time Elvis was here, this is the bungalow he stayed in. Well, he was a creature of habit. And whenever he came back, he wanted bungalow 56. And what Elvis wanted, Elvis got. That was Grace. She took care of Hollywood. Hollywood came here and took care of her.
By the time Grace retired, 9 movies had been shot at the resort. Guests here included Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, and the Von Trapp family singers. But in 1992, the Coco Palms faced a disaster that even Grace couldn't prevent.
You know, Hurricane Iniki was out there, but it was 400 miles south of Hawaii, and it was headed west. Nobody's ain't paying any attention to it, right? That thing just took a 90-degree turn, and here she comes. It's as if God took this perfect 400-mile across storm. Let me see, where's the center of Kauai? It's right there. He just slammed it right on us, and this thing was unbelievable.
160-mile-per-hour winds swept across the island. Steven Spielberg even filmed the devastation for his movie Jurassic Park. Sadly, the Coco Palms was destroyed.
This place sat here empty for 13 years. So, sadly, Iniki had a devastating impact on this hotel in the long run. We're the only island in Hawaii to ever be hit with a hurricane. We've been hit with 3 of them.
Today, the Coco Palms is in limbo as Hawaiians debate its future.
At the moment, there are plans again to develop and refurbish the site, but there are native Hawaiians who do claim the property as their own.
Some might say that it's fitting that nature is reclaiming this spot where humans tried to build upon sacred land, and that it should just be left alone. But only time will tell what's in store for this place.
The current owners would still like to see it a hotel. Other people have other things they'd like to see done with it, a park or a cultural center. Who knows?